It happens quietly, almost invisibly. A police officer driving behind you types a few numbers into a computer, or a camera mounted on the patrol car automatically scans the back of your vehicle. In less than a second, your license plate becomes a key that opens a digital file connected to multiple government databases. To you, it might look like nothing happened at all. But inside the officer's patrol vehicle, a surprising amount of information can appear in seconds. Your vehicle registration, whether the car is reported stolen, whether the registration is expired, whether the registered owner has an outstanding warrant, sometimes even whether the owner's driver's license is suspended, all triggered by something as simple as a license plate. And that raises an interesting question. When police run your license plate while you're driving down the road, what exactly are they seeing? And what are they legally allowed to do with that information? Have you ever wondered if an officer has ever run your plate without you even knowing? And if so, how often does that actually happen? If you've ever experienced a traffic stop or noticed a patrol car following you for a moment before turning away, share your experience in the comments. Many people have stories about that moment of uncertainty in the rearview mirror, because for most drivers, the entire process feels mysterious. You're driving normally. Maybe you notice a police car behind you for a few seconds. Then suddenly the officer either passes you or pulls you over. What happened during those few seconds? To understand that moment, we have to step inside the modern patrol car and look at how license plate checks actually work. In earlier decades, the process was slower and far more limited. Before digital systems became standard, an officer who wanted to check a license plate would typically radio the number to a dispatcher. The dispatcher would then run the plate through state motor vehicle records and relay the results back over the radio. This system existed for many years, and it was effective, but it took time. Running a plate could take several minutes depending on radio traffic and the availability of dispatchers. Technology gradually changed that. Today, most patrol vehicles in the United States are equipped with mobile data terminals or in-car computers. These systems allow officers to run license plates directly from their vehicles through secure law enforcement databases. When an officer types a plate number into the system, the computer queries state motor vehicle records. It can confirm whether the plate is valid, whether the registration is current, and whether the vehicle matches the plate assigned to it. In many cases, the system also checks whether the vehicle has been reported stolen. Another important database that may be checked is the National Crime Information Center, commonly called NCIC. This database, maintained by the FBI, contains information about stolen vehicles, missing persons, active warrants, and other law enforcement alerts. If a vehicle is listed as stolen in NCIC, the system will flag it immediately when the plate is entered. This means that running a plate can instantly alert an officer if a vehicle has been reported stolen anywhere in the country. But the information doesn't necessarily stop there. In many states, the plate query also displays information about the registered owner of the vehicle. This may include the owner's name, date of birth, driver's license status, and the address associated with the registration. However, it's important to understand something about this information. The system identifies the registered owner of the vehicle, not necessarily the person who is currently driving it. This distinction matters legally, and courts have addressed it. For example, in the United States Supreme Court case Kansas v. Glover in 2020, the court considered whether an officer could stop a vehicle after learning that the registered owner of the vehicle had a revoked driver's license. The court ruled that in many circumstances, it is reasonable for an officer to assume that the registered owner of a vehicle may be the person driving it, unless there is evidence suggesting otherwise. This decision clarified that running a license plate and identifying a revoked license for the registered owner can sometimes provide reasonable suspicion for a traffic stop, but that doesn't mean every plate check leads to a stop. In fact, most license plate checks result in nothing at all. Police officers run plates constantly while on patrol, often simply as part of routine observation. It allows them to identify stolen vehicles, expired registrations, or other issues that might require attention. Many drivers never realize their plate was checked because the officer continues driving once the system confirms everything is valid. And increasingly, these checks aren't always initiated manually by officers. Modern law enforcement vehicles often use automatic license plate readers, sometimes called ALPR systems. These devices use cameras mounted on patrol cars or fixed locations like highway overpasses. As vehicles pass by, the cameras capture images of license plates and convert them into text using optical character recognition. That plate number is then automatically checked against law enforcement databases. The process happens extremely quickly, often within fractions of a second. If the plate matches a vehicle reported stolen or linked to an active alert, the system notifies the officer immediately. Otherwise, the scan is simply recorded and the officer continues driving. These systems have dramatically increased the number of license plates that can be checked in a single shift. In earlier decades, an officer might manually run a handful of plates during routine patrol. With automated readers, hundreds or even thousands of plates can be scanned during the same period of time. This technological shift has created new conversations about efficiency, safety, and privacy. Supporters of license plate reader technology often point out that it has helped police recover stolen vehicles and locate suspects connected to serious crimes. Because the systems automatically check large numbers of vehicles, they can identify stolen cars that officers might otherwise never notice. There have been many documented cases where stolen vehicles were recovered quickly after an automatic reader flagged the plate. But the technology has also raised questions. If license plates are scanned constantly, what happens to the data when there is no crime involved? Different jurisdictions handle this differently. Some departments store plate scan data for a limited period of time, while others retain the information longer, depending on local policies and laws. Privacy advocates have argued that long-term storage of plate scan data could potentially create detailed records of where vehicles have traveled over time. Law enforcement agencies generally respond that the systems are designed primarily to detect stolen vehicles and vehicles associated with investigations, not to monitor ordinary drivers. This balance between investigative tools and personal privacy has been part of a broader conversation as technology has expanded in many areas of law enforcement. But returning to the moment that most drivers think about, the moment when a patrol car runs your license plate behind you, the legal framework around that action is relatively straightforward. Courts have consistently ruled that license plates are visible to the public and displayed on the exterior of vehicles specifically for identification purposes. Because of that, officers generally do not need a warrant or special permission to run a license plate. The plate is already visible to anyone who happens to see it on the road. Running the plate simply allows law enforcement to confirm information that is already linked to a publicly displayed identifier. That's why license plate checks are considered a routine part of policing. But even though the act of running a plate is routine, what happens next depends entirely on what the system reveals. If everything appears valid, the registration is current, the vehicle is not reported stolen, and there are no alerts associated with it, the officer typically has no reason to stop the vehicle. The patrol car simply continues driving. However, if the system shows that the registration has expired, the officer may have legal grounds to initiate a traffic stop depending on local laws. Similarly, if the system indicates that the vehicle is stolen or associated with a wanted person, the officer may take additional steps to investigate, and sometimes the officer may simply observe the vehicle more closely before deciding whether a stop is appropriate. For drivers, this moment can feel tense because they don't know what the officer sees on their screen. All they know is that a patrol car is behind them. You may have experienced that feeling before, glancing in the mirror and wondering if the officer is about to activate their lights. In many cases, nothing happens. The officer runs the plate, sees that everything checks out, and moves on. But understanding the process can help remove some of the mystery surrounding that moment. The officer is not accessing some secret file about your entire life. They are primarily checking vehicle registration records and law enforcement alerts associated with the plate. And the vast majority of the time, the check simply confirms that everything is normal. Technology has made the process faster and more automated than it was decades ago, but the basic purpose remains the same: identifying stolen vehicles, confirming registration status, and helping officers enforce traffic laws. Still, the interaction between technology, law enforcement authority, and everyday drivers continues to evolve. New systems appear, court decisions clarify how information can be used, policies change as agencies adapt to new tools. Which leads to an interesting thought. If a simple license plate can unlock access to multiple databases within seconds, how might future technology change the way traffic enforcement works? Will automated systems continue expanding? Or will new regulations shape how these tools are used? And perhaps the most important question for drivers is this: how much of this process do we truly understand when we see those flashing lights in the mirror? Moments like that remind us that a routine drive down the road is connected to a much larger system of laws, databases, and procedures operating quietly in the background. The next time you notice a patrol car behind you for a few seconds before it turns away, there's a good chance that your license plate was simply checked, confirmed as valid, and the officer moved on. A small digital interaction that most drivers never even notice, but one that reveals just how much information can be accessed in a matter of seconds. And now that you know how the process works, I'm curious about your experience. Have you ever noticed a police car following you briefly before turning away? Did you ever wonder if they had just run your license plate? Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Conversations like that often reveal how many everyday interactions with law enforcement happen quietly without most of us realizing what's taking place behind the scenes.